Chapter 4. Setting the Scene. Above all, we must realize that no arsenal, or no weapon in the arsenals of the world, is so formidable as the will and moral courage of free men and women. Quote by President Ronald Reagan, U.S. Army Air Force. Only slightly less than 2 decades following the end of World War I, Americans were heading off to another world war in 1939. Duty to serve one's country was a birthright in early America, so even when drafted by the Selective Service, young men were not unwilling to serve. Most early American men had the internal wiring and drive to do what men innately do best: protect. After all, they were only 3 or 4 generations away from our Revolutionary War heroes. In World War I and World War II, they deployed as men and returned to a grateful nation, hailing them as heroes. The entire country was behind them and their efforts. Their draft was not clouded by public resistance. They were given clear objectives and plans of execution, and patriotism was the only game in town. Unwavering trust in the government to lead righteously was a way of life. Despite its challenges, the country was united in each war's respective missions. The Korean War marked a noticeable shift. Our involvement and deployment to Korea was less than 5 years after the victory of World War II. The Korean War ended with a truce rather than a clear victory like the previous wars, so it left the public feeling rather unsatisfied and even disillusioned as to the purpose of our involvement. Not much was made about the return of these brave men and women. In fact, they were blindsided with indifference, so much so it has often been referred to as the Forgotten War. In the mid to late 1960s, the stage had been set for the coming of age of a generation of students who, depending upon the age of their parents, were children of either the Greatest Generation or the slightly younger parents of the Silent Generation. The latter were those who were born between 1928 and 1945 and were raised in a newly post-war era. It is said this era of adults is known for having formed the leadership of the civil rights movement in the 1960s counterculture. They are also credited with creating the rock and roll music of the 1960s and 70s. A well-known companion to rock and roll music was drugs and alcohol. As such, rock and roll music quickly became a symbol of defiance from authority. The lyrics and the vibes of the artist encouraged a myriad of behaviors that fell outside the traditional and more conventional culture. The music fostered a spirit of rebellion and independence and a spirit of questioning authority. Therefore, teenagers of the 60s were a mixed bag from the get-go, adding to the culture-shaping divide. This division was a new element to wartime not experienced in previous wars. It's safe to say the 1960s were tumultuous times had by all. America was experiencing the growing pains of a nation needing to be heard. Noise from the confluence of activism reverberated from coast to coast. The cacophony from civil activists only paled in comparison to the shots and explosions heard from Southeast Asia by way of our television sets. These images of battle in living rooms across the nation introduced a new form of entertainment, a televised war. Our nation unwittingly entered the perfect storm. The drastic culture-shaping divides, the reasons for our involvement in the conflict, the age of our conscripts, and the rules of engagement were all televised for the world to see and judge. It appeared to many as if the world was spinning out of control. There was a dire need to be heard and understood. This era marked the time when songwriters took to the stage to rally to the youth. To this day, the playlists of the 60s and 70s are hailed as the most iconic era of music.